The Point of It, by E.M. Forster. Part 1. "I don't see the point of it," said Mickey, through much imbecile laughter. Harold went on rowing. They had spent too long on the sand dunes, and now the tide was running out of the estuary strongly. The sun was setting, the fields on the opposite bank shone bright, and the farmhouse where they were stopping glowed from its upper windows as though filled to the brim with fire. "We're going to be carried out to sea," Mickey continued. "You'll never win unless you bust yourself a bit, and you a poor invalid too. I back the sea." They were reaching the central channel, the backbone, as it were, of the retreating waters. Once past it, the force of the tide would slacken, and they would have easy going until they beached under the farm. It was a glorious evening. It had been a most glorious day. They had rowed out to the dunes at the slack, bathed, raced, eaten, slept, bathed, and raced, and eaten again. Mickey was in roaring spirits. God had never thwarted him hitherto, and he could not suppose that they would really be made late for supper by an ebbing tide. When they came to the channel, and the boat, which had been slowly edging upstream, hung motionless among the moving waters, he lost all semblance of sanity and shouted, "It may be that the gulfs will wash us down, it may be we shall touch the happy isles, and see the great Achilles, whom we knew." Harold, who did not care for poetry, only shouted. His spirits also were roaring, and he neither looked nor felt a poor invalid. Science had talked to him seriously of late, shaking her head at his sunburnt body. What should Science know? She had sent him down to the sea to recruit, and Mickey to see that he did not tire himself. Mickey had been a nuisance at first, but common sense had prevailed, as it always does among the young. A fortnight ago he would not let the patient handle an oar. Now he bid him bust himself, and Harold took him at his word and did so. He made himself all will and muscle. He began not to know where he was. The thrill of the stretcher against his feet, and of the tide up his arms, merged with his friend's voice towards one nameless sensation. He was approaching the mystic state that is the athlete's true though unacknowledged goal. He was beginning to be. Mickey chanted, 1, 2, 1, 2, and tried to help by twitching the rudder. But Mickey had imagination. He looked at the flaming windows and fancied that the farm was a star, and the boat its attendant satellite. Then the tide was the rushing ether stream of the universe, the interstellar surge that beats forever. How jolly. He did not formulate his joys after the weary fashion of older people. He was far too happy to be thankful. "Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth," are the words of one who has left his youth behind, and all that Mickey sang was 1, 2. Harold laughed without hearing. Sweat poured off his forehead. He put on a spurt, as did the tide. "Wish the doctor could see you," cried Mickey. No answer. Setting his teeth, he went berserk. His ancestors called to him that it was better to die than to be beaten by the sea. He rowed with gasps and angry little cries, while the voice of the helmsman lashed him to fury. "That's right, 1, 2, plug it in harder. Oh, I say, this is a bit stiff, though. Let's give it up, old man, perhaps." The gulls were about them now. Some wheeled overhead, others bobbed past on the furrowed waters. The song of a lark came faintly from the land, and Mickey saw the doctor's trap driving along the road that led to the farm. He felt ashamed. "Look here, Harold, I oughtn't to have let you. I don't see the point of it." "Don't you?" said Harold with curious distinctness. "Well, you will some day." And so saying dropped both oars. The boat spun round at this. The farm, the trap, the song of the lark vanished, and he fell heavily against the rowlock. Mickey caught at him. He had strained his heart. Half in the boat and half out of it, he died. A rotten business. Part 2. A rotten business. It happened when Michael was 22, and he expected never to be happy again. The sound of his own voice shouting as he was carried out, the doctor's voice saying, "I consider you responsible," the coming of Harold's parents, the voice of the curate summarizing Harold's relations with the unseen. All these things affected him so deeply that he supposed they would affect him forever. They did not, because he lived to be over 70, and with the best will in the world, it is impossible to remember clearly for so long. The mind, however sensitive and affectionate, is coated with new experiences daily. It cannot clear itself of the steady accretion, and is forced either to forget the past or to distort it. So it was with Michael. In time, only the more dramatic incidents survived. He remembered Harold's final gesture, one hand grasping his own, the other plunged deep into the sea, because there was a certain aesthetic quality about it, not because it was the last of his friend. He remembered the final words for the same reason. "Don't you see the point of it? Well, you will someday." The phrase struck his fancy and passed into his own stock. After 30 or 40 years, he forgot its origin. He is not to blame. The business of life snowed him under. There is also this to say. He and Harold had nothing in common except youth. No spiritual bond could survive. They had never discussed theology or social reform, or any of the problems that were thronging Michael's brain, and consequently, though they had been intimate enough, there was nothing to remember. Harold melted the more one thought of him. Robbed of his body, he was so shadowy, nor could one imagine him as a departed spirit, for the world beyond death is surely august. Neither in heaven nor hell is there place for athletics and aimless good temper, and if these were taken from Harold, what was left? Even if the unseen life should prove an archetype of this, even if it should contain a sun and stars of its own, the sunburn of earth must fade off our faces as we look at it. The muscles of earth must wither before we can go rowing on its infinite sea. Michael sadly resigned his friend to God's mercy. He himself could do nothing, for men can only immortalize those who leave behind them some strong impression of poetry or wisdom. For himself, he expected another fate. With all humility, he knew that he was not as Harold. It was no merit of his own, but he had been born of a more intellectual stock, and had inherited powers that rendered him worthier of life and of whatever may come after it. He cared for the universe, for the tiny tangle in it that we call civilization, for his fellow men who had made the tangle and who transcended it. Love, the love of humanity, warmed him, and even when he was thinking of other matters, was looking at Orion perhaps in the cold winter evenings, a pang of joy, too sweet for description, would thrill him, and he would feel sure that our highest impulses have some eternal value and will be completed hereafter. So full a nature could not brood over death. To summarize his career, soon after the tragedy, when he in his turn was recruiting, he met the woman who was to become his helpmate through life. He had met her once before, and had not liked her. She had seemed uncharitable and hard. Now he saw that her hardness sprang from a morality that he himself lacked. If he believed in love, Janet believed in truth. She tested all men and all things. She had no patience with the sentimentalist who shelters from the world's rough and tumble. Engaged at that time to another man, she spoke more freely to Michael than she would otherwise have done, and told him that it is not enough to feel good and to feel that others are good. One's business is to make others better, and she urged him to adopt a profession. The beauty of honest work dawned upon the youth as she spoke. Mentally and physically, he came to full manhood, and after due preparation, he entered the Home Civil Service, the British Museum. Here began a career that was rather notable and wholly beneficial to humanity. With his ideals of conduct and culture, Michael was not content with the official routine. He desired to help others, and, since he was gifted with tact, they consented to the operation. Before long, he became a conciliatory force in his department. He could mollify his superiors, encourage his inferiors, soothe foreign scholars, and show that there is something to be said for all sides. Janet, who watched his rise, taxed him again with instability. But now she was wrong. The young man was not a mere opportunist. He always had a sincere opinion of his own, or he could not have retained the respect of his colleagues. It was really the inherent sweetness of his nature at work, turned by a woman's influence towards fruitful ends. At the end of a 10 years' acquaintance, the two married. In the interval, Janet had suffered much pain, for the man to whom she had been engaged had proved unworthy of her. Her character was set when she came to Michael, and, as he knew, strongly contrasted with his own, and perhaps they had already interchanged all the good they could, but the marriage proved durable and sufficiently happy. He, in particular, made endless allowances, for toleration and sympathy were becoming the cardinal points of his nature. If his wife was unfair to the official mind, or if his brother-in-law, an atheist, denounced religion, he would say to himself, "They cannot help it. They are made thus, and have the qualities of their defects. Let me rather think of my own, and strive for a wider outlook ceaselessly." He grew sweeter every day. It was partly this desire for a wider outlook that turned him to literature. As he was crossing the 40s, it occurred to him to write a few essays, somewhat retrospective in tone, and thoughtful rather than profound in content. They had some success. Their good taste, their lucid style, the tempered Christianity of their ethics, whetted the half-educated public, and made it think and feel. They were not, and were not intended to be, great literature, but they opened the doors to it, and were indubitably a power for good. The first volume was followed by The Confessions of a Middle-Aged Man. In it, Michael paid melodious tribute to youth, but showed that ripeness is all. Experience, he taught, is the only humanizer. Sympathy, balance, and many-sidedness cannot come to a man until he is elderly. It is always pleasant to be told that the best is yet to be, and the sale of the book was large. Perhaps he would have become a popular author, but his wife's influence restrained him from writing anything that he did not sincerely feel. She had borne him 3 children by now: Henry, Catherine, and Adam. On the whole, they were a happy family. Henry never gave any trouble. Catherine took after her mother. Adam, who was wild and uncouth, caused his father some anxiety. He could not understand him, in spite of careful observation, and they never became real friends. Still, it was but a little cloud in a large horizon. At home, as in his work, Michael was more successful than most men. Thus he slipped into the 50s. On the death of his father, he inherited a house in the Surrey Hills, and Janet, whose real interests were horticultural, settled down there. After all, she had not proved an intellectual woman. Her fierce manner had misled him, and perhaps herself, into believing it. She was efficient enough in London society, but it bored her, for she lacked her husband's pliancy, and aged more rapidly than he did. Nor did the country suit her. She grew querulous, disputing with other ladies about the names of flowers, and of course, the years were not without their effect on him too. By now, he was somewhat of a valetudinarian. He had given up all outdoor sports, and, though his health remained good, grew bald, and rather stout and timid. He was against late hours, violent exercise, night walks, swimming when hot, muddling about in open boats, and he often had to check himself from fidgeting the children. Henry, a charming, sympathetic lad, would squeeze his hand and say, "All right, father." But Catherine and Adam sometimes frowned. He thought of the children more and more. Now that his wife was declining, they were the future, and he was determined to keep in touch with them, remembering how his own father had failed with him. He believed in gentleness, and often stood between them and their mother. When the boys grew up, he let them choose their own friends. When Catherine, at the age of 19, asked if she might go away and earn some money as a lady gardener, he let her go. In this case, he had his reward, for Catherine, having killed the flowers, returned. She was a restless, scowling young woman, a trial to her mother, who could not imagine what girls were coming to. Then she married and improved greatly. Indeed, she proved his chief support in the coming years. For soon after her marriage, a great trouble fell on him. Janet became bedridden, and after a protracted illness, passed into the unknown. Sir Michael, for he had been knighted, declared that he should not survive her. They were so accustomed to each other, so mutually necessary, that he fully expected to pass away after her. In this, he was mistaken. She died when he was 60, and he lived to be over 70. His character had passed beyond the clutch of circumstance, and he still retained his old interests and his unconquerable benignity. A second trouble followed hard on the first. It transpired that Adam was devoted to his mother, and had only tolerated home life for her sake. After a brutal scene, he left. He wrote from the Argentine that he was sorry, but wanted to start for himself. "I don't see the point of it," quavered Sir Michael. "Have I ever stopped him, or any of you from starting?" Henry and Catherine agreed with him. Yet he felt that they understood their brother better than he did. "I have given him freedom all his life," he continued. "I have given him freedom. What more does he want?" Henry, after hesitation, said, There are some people who feel that freedom cannot be given. At least I have heard so. Perhaps Adam is like that. Unless he took freedom, he might not feel free. Sir Michael disagreed. I have now studied adolescence for many years, he replied, and your conclusions, my dear boy, are ridiculous. The two rallied to their father gallantly, and after all, he spent a dignified old age. Having retired from the British Museum, he produced a little aftermath of literature. The great public had forgotten him, but the courtliness of his musings of a pensioner procured him some circulation among elderly and educated audiences, and he found a new spiritual consolation. Anima naturaliter Anglicana, he had never been hostile to the established church, and when he criticized her worldliness and occasional inhumanity, had spoken as one who was outside her rather than against her. After his wife's death and the flight of his son, he lost any lingering taste for speculation. The experience of years disposed him to accept the experience of centuries and to merge his feeble personal note in the great voice of tradition. Yes, a serene and dignified old age. Few grudged it to him. Of course he had enemies who professed to see through him, and said that Adam had seen through him too, but no impartial observer agreed. No ulterior motive had ever biased Sir Michael. The purity of his record was not due to luck, but to purity within, and his conciliatory manner sprang from a conciliated soul. He could look back on failures and mistakes, and he had not carried out the ideals of his youth. Who has? But he had succeeded better than most men in modifying those ideals to fit the world of facts. And if love had been modified into sympathy and sympathy into compromise, let one of his contemporaries cast the first stone. One fact remained: the fact of death. Hitherto, Sir Michael had never died, and at times he was bestially afraid. But more often death appeared as a prolongation of his present career. He saw himself quietly and tactfully organizing some corner in infinity with his wife's assistance. Janet would be greatly improved. He saw himself passing from a sphere in which he had been efficient into a sphere which combined the familiar with the eternal, and in which he would be equally efficient, passing into it with dignity and without pain. This life is a preparation for the next. Those who live longest are consequently the best prepared. Experience is the great teacher. Blessed are the experienced, for they need not further modify their ideals. The manner of his death was as follows. He, too, met with an accident. He was walking from his townhouse to Catherine's by a shortcut through a slum. Some women were quarreling about a fish, and as he passed they appealed to him. Always courteous, the old man stopped, said that he had not sufficient data to judge on, and advised them to lay the fish aside for 24 hours. This chanced to annoy them, and they grew more angry with him than with one another. They accused him of doing them, of getting round them, and one, who was the worse for drink, said, "See if he gets round that," and slapped him with the fish in the face. He fell. When he came to himself, he was lying in bed with one of his headaches. He could hear Catherine's voice. She annoyed him. If he did not open his eyes, it was only because he did not choose. "He has been like this for nearly 2 years," said Henry's voice. It was, at the most, 10 minutes since he had fallen in the slum. But he did not choose to argue. "Yes, he's pretty well played out," said a third voice, actually the voice of Adam. How and when had Adam returned? But then, he's been that for the last 30 years. "Gently, old boy," said Henry. "Well, he has," said Adam. "I don't believe in cant. He never did anything since Mother died, and damned little before. They've forgotten his books because they aren't first-hand. They're rearranging the cases he arranged in the British Museum. That's the lot. What else has he done except tell people to dress warmly but not too warm? Adam, you really mustn't. It's because nobody speaks up that men of the old man's type get famous. It's a sign of your sloppy civilization. You're all afraid of originality, afraid of work, afraid of hurting one another's feelings. You let anyone come to the top who doesn't frighten you, and as soon as he dies you forget him and knight some other figurehead instead." An unknown voice said, "Shocking, Mr. Adam, shocking. Such a dear old man, and quite celebrated, too." "You'll soon get used to me, nurse?" The nurse laughed. "Adam, it is a relief to have you," said Catherine after a pause. "I want you and your boy to help me with mine." Her voice sounded dimmer. She had turned from her father without a word of farewell. One must profit by the mistakes of others. After all, more heroism. I am determined to keep in touch with my boy. Larrup him, said Adam. That's the secret. He followed his sister out of the room. Then Henry's delightful laugh sounded for the last time. You make us all feel 20 years younger, he said. More like when… The door shut. Sir Michael grew cold with rage. This was life. This was what the younger generation had been thinking. Adam he ignored, but at the recollection of Henry and Catherine he determined to die. If he chose, he could have risen from bed and driven the whole pack into the street. But he did not choose. He chose rather to leave this shoddy and ungrateful world. The immense and superhuman cynicism that is latent in all of us came at last to the top and transformed him. He saw the absurdity of love, and the vision so tickled him that he began to laugh. The nurse, who had called him a dear old man, bent over him, and at the same moment 2 boys came into the sick room. "How's Grandpapa?" asked one of them, Catherine's boy. "Not so well," the nurse answered. There was a silence. Then the other boy said, "Come along, let's cut." "But they told us not to." "Why should we do what old people tell us? Dad's pretty well played out, and so's your mother." "Shocking. Be off with you both," said the nurse. And with a little croon of admiration, Catherine's boy followed his cousin out of the room. Their grandfather's mirth increased. He rolled about in the bed, and just as he was grasping the full irony of the situation, he died, and pursued it into the unknown. Part 3. Mickey was still in bed. He was aware of so much through long melancholy dreams. But when he opened his mouth to laugh, it filled with dust. Choosing to open his eyes, he found that he had swollen enormously and lay sunk in the sand of an illimitable plain. As he expected, he had no occasion greatly to modify his ideals. Infinity had merely taken the place of his bedroom and of London. Nothing moved on its surface except a few sand pillars, which would sometimes merge into each other as though confabulating, and then fall with a slight hiss. Save for these, there was no motion, no noise, nor could he feel any wind. How long had he lain here? Perhaps for years, long before death perhaps, while his body seemed to be walking among men. Life is so short and trivial that who knows whether we arrive for it entirely, whether more than a fraction of the soul is aroused to put on flesh. The bud and the blossom perish in a moment, the husk endures, and may not the soul be a husk? It seemed to Mickey that he had lain in the dust forever, suffering and sneering, and that the essence of all things, the primal power that lies behind the stars, is senility. Age, toothless, dropsical age, ungenerous to age and to youth, born before all ages, and outlasting them. The universe, as old age. The place degraded while it tortured. It was vast, yet ignoble. It sloped downward into darkness and upward into cloud. But into what darkness? What clouds? No tragic splendor glorified them. When he looked at them, he understood why he was so unhappy. For they were looking at him, sneering at him while he sneered. Their dirtiness was more ancient than the hues of day and night, their irony more profound. He was part of their jest, even as youth was part of his, and slowly he realized that he was, and had for some years been, in hell. All around him lay other figures, huge and fungus. It was as if the plain had festered. Some of them could sit up, others scarcely protruded from the sand, and he knew that they had made the same mistake in life as himself, though he did not know yet what the mistake had been. Probably some little slip, easily avoided, had one but been told. Speech was permissible. Presently a voice said, "Is not ours a heavenly sky? Is it not beautiful?" "Most beautiful," answered Mickey, and found each word a stab of pain. Then he knew that one of the sins here punished was appreciation. He was suffering for all the praise that he had given to the bad and mediocre upon earth. When he had praised out of idleness, or to please people, or to encourage people. For all the praise that had not been winged with passion. He repeated, "Most beautiful," and the sky quivered. For he was entering into fuller torments now. One ray of happiness survived. His wife could not be in this place. She had not sinned with the people of the plain, and could not suffer their distortion. Her view of life had proved right after all, and, in his utter misery, this comforted him. Janet should again be his religion, and as eternity dragged forward and returned upon itself and dragged forward, she would show him that old age, if rightly managed, can be beautiful. That experience, if rightly received, can lead the soul of man to bliss. Then he turned to his neighbor, who was continuing his hymn of praise. "I could lie here forever," he was saying. "When I think of my restlessness during life, that is to say, during what men miscall life, for it is death really, this is life. When I think of my restlessness on earth, I am overcome by so much goodness and mercy. I could lie here forever." "And will you?" asked Mickey. "Ah, that is the crowning blessing. I shall, and so will you." Here a pillar of sand passed between them. It was long before they could speak or see. Then Mickey took up the song, chafed by the particles that were working into his soul. "I, too, regret my wasted hours," he said, "especially the hours of my youth. I regret all the time I spent in the sun. In later years, I did repent, and that is why I am admitted here where there is no sun. Yes, and no wind, and none of the stars that drove me almost mad at night once. It would be appalling, would it not, to see Orion again, the central star of whose sword is not a star but a nebula, the golden seed of worlds to be. How I dreaded the autumn on earth when Orion rises, for he recalled adventure and my youth. It was appalling. How thankful I am to see him no more." "Ah, but it was worse," cried the other, "to look high leftward from Orion and see the twins. Castor and Pollux were brothers, one human, the other divine, and Castor died, but Pollux went down to hell that he might be with him." "Yes, that is so. Pollux went into hell. Then the gods had pity on both, and raised them aloft to be stars whom sailors worship, and all who love and are young. Zeus was their father, Helen their sister, who brought the Greeks against Troy. I dreaded them more than Orion." They were silent, watching their own sky. It approved. They had been cultivated men on earth, and these are capable of the nicer torments hereafter. Their memories will strike exquisite images to enhance their pain. "I will speak no more," said Mickey to himself. "I will be silent through eternity." But the darkness prized open his lips, and immediately he was speaking. "Tell me more about this abode of bliss," he asked. "Are there grades in it? Are there ranks in our heaven?" "There are two heavens," the other replied. "The heaven of the hard and of the soft. We here lie in the heaven of the soft. It is a sufficient arrangement, for all men grow either hard or soft as they grow old." As he spoke, the clouds lifted, and looking up the slope of the plain, Mickey saw that in the distance it was bounded by mountains of stone, and he knew, without being told, that among those mountains Janet lay, rigid, and that he should never see her. She had not been saved. The darkness would mock her too, forever. With him lay the sentimentalists, the conciliators, the peacemakers, the humanists, and all who have trusted the warmer vision. With his wife were the reformers and ascetics and all sword-like souls. By different paths they had come to hell, and Mickey now saw what the bustle of life conceals, that the years are bound either to liquefy a man or to stiffen him, and that love and truth, who seem to contend for our souls like angels, hold each the seeds of our decay. "It is indeed a sufficient arrangement," he said, "both sufficient and simple. But answer one question more that my bliss may be perfected. In which of these two heavens are the young?" His neighbor answered, "In neither, there are no young." He spoke no more, and settled himself more deeply in the dust. Mickey did the same. He had vague memories of men and women who had died before reaching maturity, of boys and unwedded maidens and youths lowered into the grave before their parents' eyes. Whither had they gone, that undeveloped minority? What was the point of their brief existence? Had they vanished utterly, or were they given another chance of accreting experiences until they became like Janet or himself? One thing was certain. There were no young, either in the mountains or the plain, and perhaps the very memory of such creatures was an illusion fostered by cloud. The time was now ripe for a review of his life on Earth. He traced his decomposition. His work had been soft, his books soft. He had softened his relations with other men. He had seen good in everything, and this is itself a sign of decay. Whatever occurred, he had been appreciative, tolerant, pliant. Consequently, he had been a success. Adam was right. It was the moment in civilization for his type. He had mistaken self-criticism for self-discipline. He had muffled in himself and others the keen, heroic edge. Yet the luxury of repentance was denied him. The fault was his, but the fate humanity's, for everyone grows hard or soft as he grows old. This is my life, thought Mickey. My books forgotten, my work superseded. This is the whole of my life. And his agony increased, because all the same there had been in that life an elusive joy, which, if only he could have distilled it, would have sweetened infinity. It was part of the jest that he should try, and should eternally oscillate between disgust and desire. For there is nothing ultimate in hell. Men will not lay aside all hope on entering it, or they would attain to the splendor of despair. To have made a poem about hell is to mistake its very essence. It is the imagination of men, who will have beauty, that fashions it as ice or flame. Old, but capable of growing older, Mickey lay in the sandy country, remembering that once he had remembered a country that had not been sand. He was aroused by the mutterings of the spirits round him. An uneasiness, such as he had not noted in them before, had arisen. "A pillar of sand," said one. Another said, "It is not, it comes from the river." He asked, "What river?" "The spirits of the damned dwell over it. We never speak of that river." "Is it a broad river?" "Swift, and very broad." "Do the damned ever cross it?" "They are permitted, we know not why, to cross it now and again." And in these answers he caught a new tone, as if his companions were frightened, and were finding means to express their fear. When he said, "With permission they can do us no harm," he was answered, "They harm us with light and a song." And again, "They harm us because they remember and try to remind." Of what would they remind us? Of the hour when we were as they. As he questioned, a whisper arose from the low-lying verges. The spirits were crying to each other faintly. He heard, "It is coming. Drive it back over the river, shatter it, compel it to be old." And then the darkness was cloven, and a star of pain broke in his soul. He understood now, a torment greater than any was at hand. "I was before choice," came the song. "I was before hardness and softness were divided. I was in the days when truth was love, and I am." All the plain was convulsed, but the invader could not be shattered. When it pressed, the air parted and the sand pillars fell, and its path was filled with senile weeping. "I have been all men, but all men have forgotten me. I transfigured the world for them until they preferred the world. They came to me as children, afraid. I taught them, and they despised me. Childhood is a dream about me. Experience a slow forgetting. I govern the magic years between them, and am." "Why trouble us?" moaned the shades. "We could bear our torment, just bear it, until there was light and a song. Go back again over the river. This is heaven, we were saying. That darkness is God. We could praise them till you came. The book of our deeds is closed. Why open it? We were damned from our birth. Leave it there. O supreme jester, leave us. We have sinned. We know it. And this place is death and hell." "Death comes," the voice pealed. "And death is not a dream or a forgetting. Death is real. But I too am real, and whom I will I save. I see the scheme of things, and in it no place for me, the brain and the body against me. Therefore I rend the scheme in two, and make a place, and under countless names have harrowed hell. Come." Then, in tones of inexpressible sweetness, "Come to me all who remember. Come out of your eternity into mine. It is easy, for I am still at your eyes, waiting to look out of them, still in your hearts, waiting to beat. The years that I dwelt with you seemed short, but they were magical, and they outrun time." The shades were silent. They could not remember. Who desires to remember? Desire is enough. There is no abiding home for strength and beauty among men. The flower fades. The seas dry up in the sun. The sun and all the stars fade as a flower. But the desire for such things, that is eternal, that can abide, and he who desires me is I. Then Mickey died a second death. This time he dissolved through terrible pain, scorched by the glare, pierced by the voice. But as he died he said, "I do desire," and immediately the invader vanished, and he was standing alone on the sandy plain. It had been merely a dream, but he was standing. How was that? Why had he not thought to stand before? He had been unhappy in hell, and all that he had to do was to go elsewhere. He passed downwards, pained no longer by the mockery of its cloud. The pillars brushed against him and fell, the nether darkness went over his head. On he went till he came to the banks of the infernal stream, and there he stumbled over a piece of wood, no vague substance, but a piece of wood that had once belonged to a tree. At his impact it moved, and water gurgled against it. He had embarked. Someone was rowing. He could see the blades of oars moving towards him through the foam, but the rower was invisible in cloud. As they neared mid-channel, the boat went more slowly, for the tide was ebbing, and Mickey knew that once carried out, he would be lost eternally. There was no second hope of salvation. He could not speak, but his heart beat time to the oars. 1, 2. Hell made her last effort, and all that is evil in creation, all the distortions of love and truth by which we are vexed, came surging down the estuary, and the boat hung motionless. Mickey heard the pant of breath through the roaring, the crack of angelic muscles. Then he heard a voice say, "The point of it!" And a weight fell off his body and he crossed midstream. It was a glorious evening. The boat had sped without prelude into sunshine. The sky was cloudless, the earth gold, and gulls were riding up and down on the furrowed waters. On the bank they had left were some sand dunes rising to majestic hills. On the bank in front was a farm, full to the brim with fire. The end. Best Audiobooks for Free hopes that you have enjoyed this production of The Point of It by E.M. Forster. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble, as your subscription is the support we need to create more great free content. Please look to our website at bestaudiobooksforfree.com for a complete list of our audiobooks.